Good morning. My name is Dr. Kathleen McInnis, and I am a senior fellow in the International Security Program and the director of the Smart Women, Smart Power initiative here at CSIS. On behalf of both the CSIS International Security Program and the Europe Program, we are honored to host Laurynas Kasciunas, who is the Lithuanian Parliament's chairman of the National Security and Defense Committee. So stay tuned as we discuss the upcoming 2023 NATO Summit in Vilnius, U.S. and Lithuania's defense and strategic cooperation, Russia's war in Ukraine, including the Belarus factor, among other things. And I noticed that you did your PhD in EU internal integration and its external implications for countries like Ukraine, and you were the director of the Eastern Europe Center, so you bring an enormous amount of policy, practical, as well as academic experience to the position that you're currently holding. So there's nobody better to talk about these things with. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure being here. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Absolutely. Well, to start us off, I was wondering if you could share with us your sense of the mood in Vilnius right now.
No, when we wake up every morning, we should think about Ukraine.
Yes.
We have a poll survey which shows 60% of Lithuanian society already somehow contributed to support of the Ukraine. Not, just supporting 60%, but gave their money, donated, gave some their internal resources, So if you go to the border between Ukraine and Poland, you will see a lot of Lithuanian numbers with cars, because we are bringing the support.
Wow.
So, of course, Ukraine is number one question, because we understand that Ukraine fights not only on behalf of their own nation, independence, statehood, but we fight for our independence too. Mm-hmm. That's why we need to support as much as possible Ukraine, and Ukraine is winning time for us. Yep. Winning time for us. I think they dropped back Russians at least from 5 to 10 years with the development, with military power, and we should maintain the sanctions, which is a good containment policy of Russians' military power, and we should be ready inside of our country to create a credible deterrence architecture inside of NATO with the United States. Our national capabilities we should strengthen also what we are doing with total defense or comprehensive security approach, which is vital now for us, to include as much as possible not only regular army but also our society. We transforming rifleman union and so on and so on. So we peace through strength, the concept of Ronald Reagan. I think it's very vital today when we are talking about NATO eastern flank, and also when we are talking about our national decisions. And to have plan for Ukraine, to support Ukraine, because this war can be very long-standing, and we need, because Russians want to create fatigue in the West.
Yep.
And we know what Ukraine is very much dependent on support from the western part of the world, and we want to bring Ukraine to the Russian conditions-based negotiations, which would recognize the new reality, geopolitical reality in these occupied regions. So we should reject this Putin's plan. We should help Ukrainians not only to make Russians struggle in Ukraine, but to defeat them in Ukraine. That's why our support, military support, technological support is crucial importance.
I was wondering if I could press you on one of the points that you just made, which I thought was really intriguing, that it's delayed Russia 5 to 10 years. What specifically have you seen, or do you believe it has delayed, and what would its impact on the Baltics have been?
On the Baltics, very simple example. Even I sometimes a little bit joking with in Ukrainian TV, thanking them for Kaliningrad region demilitarization. Because it's a very militarized region. As you know, 20,000 troops was in Kaliningrad just 1 year before. Now the best of them in Ukraine maybe will not come back.
Right.
So Kaliningrad region demilitarization is the best example how Ukrainians, brave nations, support our national security.
Interesting.
But we understand that Russians can reestablish it very fast too. Its power. Also stocks, rockets, all that kind of, you see what Russians are already using in Ukraine, and of course it's not the best already tools that we had 1 year before. I think Ukraine, Ukraine made a fantastic job. I remember all the prognosis 4 months ago about 2 weeks 3 weeks,
Yeah, I
okay,
mean-
2 months at least, and you see now you're thinking, will Lithuania go to take back the Crimea or not? You know, so how we change the picture,
Yes.
and we show what does it mean to have will to resist. So because when you defend your homes, when you defend your family, when you defend your cities. I was 5 times in Ukraine during the war.
Yep.
I just came back from
I saw that,
Ukraine.
yeah.
From Ukraine 4 days ago. I was in Kharkiv.
Yep.
With Russian-speaking Kharkiv, 95% people who speaks in this city in Russian, and Putin thought it will be part of his Russian world,
Right.
and we rejected that.
Right.
We defended their city, and how we did that. It's lessons learned for us too, especially for Lithuania.
Because you've a sizable Russian population, or Russian-speaking population, excuse me, within.
Yeah, maybe in Latvia, Estonia it's more,
Okay.
but we have also 5-6%, but we are very integrated in
Yes,
the
yes.
Lithuanian society. Could be better, but not bad. The situation is not bad.
So what were your key observations from your trip to Ukraine?
Total
Recently.
defense concept.
Total defense concept? Okay.
Not only regular army, but also territorial defense, and also backup. I mean, people should be also included into a civil defense.
Okay.
It means you should think about all a medical situation. You should think about supporting regular forces. Without, for example, the mayor of Kharkiv, he was formerly seen as a more pro-Russian guy, but now he's a hero of Ukrainians. He said, without 10-15,000 Kharkiv people which took part in defending the city, regular army would not defend. It will be a much bigger problem to defend the Kharkiv. So, including of society.
Okay.
So our idea is now, to get back in the national decision making, not only strengthening our army capabilities, which is a top priority, but also include society in the Rifleman Union, to work with military reserve, which is 100,000 people in Lithuania, a lot of our homework, what we need to do.
And but Lithuania's also done a lot of work on the total defense concept in recent years. So it's an amplification of the work that you are already doing then?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We adopted the strategy of civil resistance, military and non-military. We are transforming our committee in our Rifleman Union. So we have 2 main pillars of civil resistance. It's a will to resist,
Yep.
because the enemy wins not only when we come to your land and try to change their flags, but when they break your will to resist.
Yeah.
So one thing, and another the capabilities to resist. So it means to work with guns, because what is the lessons learned from Ukraine? You need in 24 hours. This citizen who wants to defend the country should know where to go,
Right.
how to use the gun, or our tools, which will be useful for defense, and to be in the structure and to have communications.
Okay.
So this is like a 3 main things that we need to elaborate, at least to the most active part of our society, to 300,000 people. If it will be included in our defense plans, would be good. Yeah.
Well, and you spoke about the will to resist, and Lithuania has long been battling Russian political and information warfare. And what are the lessons that you have learned from that experience, and what do you hope that the other nations like the United States can take on from that experience?
I think, in every country we have some different things, but different situations. But yes, of course. One thing is what we trying to use the national minorities. So in Lithuania there is no big challenge because, as I said, it's 5-6%, so we are quite good integrated. But we're using, for example, the cultural wars. Liberal part of society and conservative part of society. And when we have clashes also in Lithuania on some value-based questions, we're trying to use it because we are so-called conservative defenders of conservative Europe. He's a Putin KGB guy, but he's like very conservative. And he's trying to play this. So one thing that we do not invoke the problems, sometimes we just use your internal problems.
Right.
To using their for the
cleavages,
exactly.
exacerbating the cleavages.
If you have cleavage, we're trying to use. Another point, which is also important, we have at least now about 20% of our society, which still thinks that in Soviet times was better than in independent.
20%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now it's less
Sure.
because it was 35, 30, and these people are keen to watch more Russian TV, to recognize Putin's imperialistic ambitions, and so on and so on. So how to work with them, this party side, is a big challenge. And these are two approaches. One approach is communication theory, which says if you repeat one message using Russian TV channels, so possibly we will be convinced to do as Putin says.
Right.
So banning sometimes Russian TV channels, we are doing sometimes this, we are using this, this tool, but of course if you want to have a permanent and good decision of a situation, it's called so-called resonance model. It means that people, they are not affected by messaging and propaganda, but because of internal feelings, they choose Russian propaganda who confirms their internal feelings.
Right.
So if you want to change that, so you should change the social status, you should change economical situation, bigger salaries, and so on and so on. So it's not so easy only, it's not about only communication problems.
Right.
It's much more deeper.
Getting rid of sources of grievance and susceptibility to those sorts of messages. Interesting. Okay. What, in your view, need to be the immediate priorities now for supporting Ukraine?
Weapons, weapons, weapons.
Okay.
You know, in early July, we had a lot of Russia pressure on Ukraine. You remember in Donbass, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, we overtake it. Because the power balance, firepower balance, was 1 to 20.
Yeah.
And when HIMARS came, thank you for the United States. And it's stabilized situation at one moment because we Ukrainians hit a lot of logistic centers, infrastructures of Russians, and so on and so on. It's stabilized, and then it opened the possibility for Ukrainians to counterattack. So we are talking about 20 systems of HIMARS, okay, 25 maybe, or something like that. So how effective?
Yeah.
So if it could be 50, 75 systems, you know, it's opens the door for Ukrainians to do what we need to do, to not only to defend themselves, but to beat Russians in Ukraine and to take back what belongs to Ukraine, to reestablish its territorial integrity. So weapons, weapons, weapons. Of course, air defense. You see what we are doing, you know. But you cannot beat Ukrainians in a battlefield. We just, you know, strikes the rockets into the cities, into the civil infrastructure. So it's so unfair and it's so, you know, brutal things what the Russians are doing.
Yeah.
Now I was in Izum, a city which is overtaken by Ukrainians. No houses left which are like functional. I mean, even hospital, which is a regional hospital, this smashed hospital. They took everything out and they, you know, they had barbarians take everything from the hospital. I even raise a question, look, why if you want to keep this city occupied, why do you take everything from the hospital and bring somewhere to Russia or to occupied regions deeper back to the east? It's, you know, it's a motivation for them to be there, for soldiers to take everything and to bring to their homes. I mean, it's a disaster. We still don't understand exactly with whom we have a deal. I mean, it's not a civilized war. I mean, it's 600 hospitals are attacked in Ukraine. But Ukrainians, you know, I see the rockets are flying, but Ukrainians already fixing the bridges.
Yeah.
How to say? I would say Russians made a big mistake. They underestimated. Ukrainians. He thought about we will meet him with bread and salt and especially Russian-speaking cities.
Right.
We brought the parade uniforms. FSB guys tried to find maybe the best houses in Kiev and share between which
Right.
It was real stories.
Right.
I mean, and now we have big problems. Yeah. Big problems.
The war crimes, the atrocities, the trauma is just unbelievable.
Exactly.
So could you share your thinking on what the entry of Belarus into the war might mean, and what must we be prepared for in that particular scenario?
Yes, first point, what Belarus and Lukashenko is in the pocket of Putin. So his power of maneuver is very, very narrow and small. I remember even in 2014, I asked Mr. Turchinov, he was former Rada leader, speaker of Rada, before the elections of Poroshenko. and he is acting president. And even in 2014, it was like possible interpretations, but Russians can use Belarus territory to attack Ukrainian from the north. He went to Lukashenko, to Minsk, asking him, say, being neutral. Don't give a possibility for Russians to use your territory. He asked him several times. So officially, Lukashenko said, look, of course, we are a sovereign country, I guarantee you, we will not go. In the evening, after some drinks, he asked once more time, and Lukashenko said to him, if we will go, I will inform in 48 hours. So he had, even 8 years ago, he had 48 hours neutrality.
Wow.
How many hours he has now, I don't know, if any. But during his 3 decades in power, Lukashenko invested in the internal structures. OMON, KGB, for repressing opposition, repressing civil society.
Yeah.
But he was not investing in the military.
Okay.
So military capabilities of Belarus is not sufficient to have something very real thing.
Okay.
So he needs sometimes to show to Russians what he is trying to be ready. That's why he now announced about this regional new structures with Russians. I think he's just trying to legitimize these 20,000 Russians, mobilized people who will come to the trainings.
Right.
Just before.
Okay.
Not capable, but for trainings.
Right.
He has several brigades on the border with Ukraine. Of course, it pushed Ukrainians to keep attention and to bring resources to the border. But I'm not sure if Lukashenko is. He wouldn't want that. How he's strong still to not to enter the war, I'm not sure. But he does not want that because it will turn away. And when people in Belarus also can ask him what we are doing in Ukraine, why we need this war. And his narrative for 3 decades was. Belarus, no war, and in the life. Because big trauma was for Belarusians in the Second World War when we lost about 50% of the population. So no war narrative was in his all the time strategy, and now he is pushed to talk about the war.
Interesting.
So it's everything against his assumptions and
structures
concept.
Exactly. Okay, interesting. Well, and there's been a lot of discussion about for obvious reasons, about the possibility of the use of nuclear weapons in this war. In your view, how likely is it that nuclear weapons might be used in this conflict? And related, how is Lithuania thinking about this or preparing for that kind of possibility?
Many interpretations, of course.
Yes.
When Russians this is a logical thing all the time. When Russians has problems in the field, on the ground, we start to talk about nuclear.
Yes, I mean
all the time, and we will do that.
Yeah, exactly. They've done it before.
All the time, all the time. So first of all, we want to bring fear back into international relations. He knows what fear in Western philosophy, especially in Western Europe, not America. America knows how to do deals, things with such kind of guys. But I mean, in Western Europe, fear is international relations is old history.
Right.
We are still in the end of history. We are still in the post-war epoch, and so on, so on. So when you starting to talk about nuclear, somebody in Western parts of society and political elites will say, oh, maybe we will stop. Let's go to negotiations. Better peace, maybe bad peace, but
at least it's not nuclear use.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think his idea is to, make a chantage, what English saying, like to use the tool leverage to convince West to push Zelensky and Ukrainians to the negotiations. So this is the main idea.
They do not appear ready to do.
Ukrainians are not, will not do that. Will not do. So I think it's one of the top ideas of Putin now when he started to talk to convince West to push Ukraine.
So it's a more political signaling.
Yes.
Okay. And again, exposing some of the cleavages that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So, of course, we can imagine, but Europe will not go to this Russian scenario. So he can show another stage of escalation. He can use maybe tactical nuclear on Black Sea. showing that I can do it.
Yeah.
You know, and this is important moment how we will respond.
Yeah.
Because 7 months ago we made a lot of, I would say, mistakes, saying what we will not to do, but what instead of what we were gonna do.
Right.
You know,
Right.
nor air closing the air, sky, and so on. And you remember 7 months ago. So now we should convince Russians what Mr. Sullivan said. Catastrophical circumstances
Right.
for Russians. It's a real thing, and it should be, if he will use, it should mean that NATO is directly engaged in the conflict.
Right. Lithuania has been quite prescient of warning the U.S. and NATO about the resurgence of Russia and the threat it poses since at least 2008, with varying levels of receptivity in different capitals. But with that in mind, I'd love to know, what do you think is Putin's strategy, and what do we need to think about as we contemplate Russia's future, given that you guys have been so prescient about its strategy in the past?
You know, I remember when all the time we talked about Russia, we were now considered as a one single question country, Russophobic country, and so on and so on. Now we feel what we were right. You know, we said,
vindicated for sure.
Exactly. I remember when Western colleagues said, if we will have a trade with Russia, we will not go to a war. When they tried to convince why we need Nord Stream.
Right, right.
If you have trade, interdependence,
Yeah.
you will not go to a war.
Yeah.
It's collapsed.
Yeah.
Don't give weapons to Ukraine since 2014 because it will escalate and it will provoke Russia.
Right.
We did not give enough weapons. Does it escalated?
Right.
You know, Russia filled the vacuum, tried to fill the vacuum. So this is lessons very important. So peace through strength. Repeating this concept, because only when you are in the strong positions, when you have a power, you can deal with Russians. So first idea is to beat Russia in Ukraine, to beat, give possibility for Ukrainians to take back everything that belongs to them, to establish their independence and territorial integrity. And I think it will impose some internal cleavages inside of Russia.
Yeah.
Ukraine, if they will defeat Russia in Ukraine, it will invoke internal cleavages in Russia.
Yeah.
And, you know, we know what does it mean. I mean, it can some transformation inside of regime. It does not mean democratization of Russia, not necessary, because it's difficult to do that because of historical circumstances, social
and societal structures and
exactly.
And, you know.
But I think it will invoke some internal cleavages.
So if we could turn to the NATO Summit and the NATO context, and I'm curious as to your views on the NATO Madrid Summit and what we need to do now, and then looking forward, what ought to be the priorities for the Vilnius Summit in 2023?
So we are very glad with the NATO Madrid Summit because we lobbied a lot on forward defense. It's not Cold War idea about 900,000 troops on the border with Soviets, but it's a more presence in place.
Right.
Deterrence by denial
Yep.
instead of deterrence by punishment.
Right. Right.
We should be ready to fight on the line. The first idea is to deter.
Yeah.
But if they come, we should be ready to fight on the line.
Yeah.
So that's why the brigade idea, which is in the NATO conclusions, we are implementing now with Germany, very trying to intensify this process. We're preparing the infrastructure. We would like to have brigade, which will be integrated into the NATO, all defense plans, German brigade in place.
Okay.
In Lithuania.
In Lithuania.
In Lithuania. We have good
And
news.
it was a battalion before, so that's a
So
sizable.
this battalion, it keeps.
Okay, so it's an addition.
separate things.
Okay.
Yeah, it's separate things.
Okay.
So this battalion, EFP, battle group, we are keeping. Germans also leading. There are Norway, also Netherlands. So it's one structure. Now we have command control element already of new brigade, but we want to have them in place.
Right.
And also we have very good news from United States, and thank you for that. It's a battalion. Heel to toe, persistent presence in Lithuania.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was big and good decision.
Yeah.
Because Russians when Americans come to our region, Russians start to be very nervous. I mean, we understand that it's a power, American power, and we respect this power. So Americans' presence in Lithuania is crucially important. So combat ready, persistent presence of American battalion is important for us. Now we should think how to integrate them more into our defense planning.
Yeah.
Because it's about the command control. Is it the American line? Is it more integrated in our national defense forces? Because it's NATO EFP is more integrated in our brigade, Iron Wolf Brigade, and so on. We should think about these modalities, but leave it for the military guys. So the idea is to integrate them more, but it's a very important decision for us.
Yeah.
Well,
and every time I've spoken to military officers that have been in Lithuania, they've been satisfied with the deployment. They've learned a lot. The rotation allows them to test the logistics.
Exactly.
It's a really beneficial experience as they describe it.
Yes, because we feel a little bit like a West Berlin now in Cold War times. Because Belarus lost sovereignty, so Russian troops will be in Belarus. They can easily be transported to the Lithuanian border. Capabilities of Kaliningrad region now it's dropped a little bit, but we can be reestablished. And we are a little bit locked. We have this Suwalki corridor with Poland. It's important, but that's why we need forward defense in our country. And this is our idea. And it leads to the NATO adaptation process, which also will lead to in Vilnius Summit. It's about regional plans based on resources, reinforcement which should come faster to our country when it's needed, and so on and so on. So it's also very important for us.
But how does the possible accession of Finland and Sweden change the dynamic for the Baltics? Because part of the problem with the contingency planning for the Baltics is always that it was a bit isolated outside of the NATO context, and so that changes. So, and how is the thinking in Vilnius changing? How is the planning changing?
So we have more strategic depth.
Yeah,
it's important for us. We Baltic Sea theoretically as internal NATO sea, but it's only theoretically. We need to do a lot of things more to make it internal sea. Right. Because Swedes have good capabilities in maritime domain. Air defense, and we're already thinking how to contribute to our regional security. Also, as you see, Estonia and Finland, it's very close. We can block Petersburg port and our strategic arteries of Russia's military movement. Theoretically, I mean, in a way of war. So it's very important for us. But the fundamentals of our existence, threats, risks, Kaliningrad, Belarus, which lost sovereignty, military behavior of Russia in the western part of western direction, it still exists. So it's very good accession of these two countries. We are supporting and very much, but it does not change everything. Sure. Fundamental things which still makes influence on our security.
Sure. So turning to the Vilnius Summit, what do you hope are the priorities as we go into next year?
First of all, what we agreed in Madrid, we should show in Vilnius what we did.
Okay, so the
brigades,
implementation.
Regional plans, adaptation process, and so on. Also, I think we should talk more about 2%. Okay. What is also important, border sharing.
And Lithuania is at what, 2.25?
2.5.
2.5.
2.5, third place in NATO. Now, from GDP, 2.5. It's a third place from NATO. It's, I think, power of example for ours. So I think we can start to talk about 2% as already bottom line.
Right, right. So the floor, not the ceiling.
Floor, exactly. So I think it's also will be very, very useful. And of course, let's talk about Ukrainians' perspectives. I understand it's quite hard, I mean, to talk, and it's a lot of dilemmas. But let's propose the idea. Let's help them to win against Russians, and we will talk later. But the idea of their accession to NATO should be also on the table, because nobody from the East, no elephant in the room, no Russians decision makers can have an informal veto on
Right.
enlargement.
Right.
They don't have the right to choose and decide over nations'
Who's a part of the
decisions.
alliance?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So Ukraine membership should be a part of, and
At least discussions
discussion on that should
about
be.
perspectives
Wow.
and should be.
Okay. Well, we are just about out of time, so thank you so
Thank you so
much. And to our online audience, the CSIS website has lots of interesting reports and discussions that you can find. Have a poke around and have a wonderful day.